Good morning, everyone. Wel- Welcome to Financial
Allison.
Fridays with SAANYS and Equitable. Apologize for the delay. Today's topic is healthcare and retirement. We are excited to offer these sessions in cooperation with our corporate partner, Equitable Advisors. They are a long-standing presence in New York, and a large portion of their New York client base is built upon the work they do within the public education system. Through Equitable, SANY members can receive a competitive insurance rate in the full array of retirement services, a complimentary financial profile for SANY members, which we definitely urge you to take advantage of. This is a great benefit for our membership. Joining us today from Equitable is Mike. We'll save questions until the end of the presentation, but feel free to ask your
You can feel free to ask the questions in the chat or the question feature on Zoom. I'll take over while Lachey dropped out. So Mike, go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit, and then you can start the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both. I appreciate it. My name is Mike Fasulo. I am a financial advisor with Equitable. I've been with the company for about 18 years now. And over those years, I've built my practice working with individuals as well as small business owners with their retirement needs, their insurance needs. And so, if you look at a pie chart of what I do, maybe 20 or 30% revolves around insurances, includes disability, long-term care, Medicare insurance, health insurance. But the majority really is retirement planning, college funding, and general investing. So obviously today's topic is healthcare and retirement. So I'll just take a quick second and thank you. Thanks SAANYS for the opportunity to speak to everybody. Thank you for everyone who is on this call. Appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your Friday and showing some interest in the topic. And like Lachey and Allison was saying, we'll go through a handful of things here. And if you have any questions, please feel free to either reach out to me after the fact, or there's going to be some time at the end of the presentation as well where we can answer, any questions. So bear with me just a moment. I'm going to start to share my screen and get into the presentation. One moment. Just want to hide. How's that looking, Allison? We looking okay?
Yeah, we can see it. Looks great. Thanks.
All right, thanks. So again, this presentation is really going to have two parts to it. There's going to be the pre-65 or Medicare portion, which really ranges typically from age 55 to 65 or whenever you retire to the age of 65. And then the second part will really be Medicare or post-65, because there's differences when it comes to discussing health insurance during those periods of time. So before we really get into it, I have to keep the compliance lords happy. I'm going to sit on this screen for like 5 or 7 seconds. If you want to go ahead and read through it, it just talks about, what we do, what we don't do. So sorry about this. Okay. So again, that pre-65, which ranges from typically retirement or 55 to the age of 65. There's a few things we'll talk about. We'll talk about your district offerings with 1,000-foot overview. We'll talk about different options. We'll talk about the New York State marketplace, which is often referred to as Obamacare, or as well as dental. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. Okay. So healthcare offerings tend to be district and contract specific. And what I mean by that is that if you are employed by the Mexico School District, comparatively speaking to the city of Syracuse, your benefits are going to be different. Sometimes they're offered post-retirement benefits. I know from tier to tier, it's different. For example, my wife is a teacher in the city of Syracuse School District. She's been around for about 17 or 19 years, and she's a tier 4 employee. And being a tier 4 employee, her health insurance benefits are XYZ. Now, she's got a lot of colleagues that are tier 5 and tier 6, and they're very different. So unfortunately, throughout this presentation, I'm not going to be able to speak specifically on your current health benefits if you're still employed. But I do encourage you to reach out to either your HR department or your district benefits department, where they'll be able to really drill down and give you some of those specifics. Upon retirement, though, is when things kind of change, right? Some school districts will offer post-retirement between the ages of whether it's 55 or 57 or 58 when you retire to the age of 65. I feel like most districts actually do. However, not all of them. So other things to consider are, whether or not you can get on your spouse's plan. And then obviously, like I mentioned before, the New York State of Health. So we'll talk about those. Regardless of which option you end up going with, whether it's through the school district, through your spouse's or significant others' benefits, or the New York State Health Exchange, there's going to be things to consider. One, you want to make sure that your healthcare providers that you are currently seeing accept whatever new coverage that you're going on. You want to make sure that they are considered in network. If they are out of network, the cost could be significantly higher, or it might not be covered at all. So you want to be careful with that. Obviously, you're going to make a side-by-side comparison of the cost and the premiums, and you're going to want to make sure that your medications are covered through whatever plan that you switch on. So that's across the board, whatever options that you decide. If health insurance is not offered through your district when you retire and pre-65, what are your options? The next best thing, in my opinion, would be to do is to look to see if whether or not, if your spouse or significant other is working, whether their employer offers health insurance that you can jump onto. Even up to this point, let's say, because I know health insurance through the school districts tend to be pretty darn good. If up to this point over the last 20, 30 years, your spouse has been on your plan, it doesn't mean that you can't get onto their plan once you retire and drop coverage. So that may be the best option. And when I say best option, I mean most cost effective, and it may have the best, the most robust benefits package as well. But let's say your spouse is retired or your spouse's employer does not offer health insurance. That's when you're going to look to see what the New York State of Health offers. And we're going to talk about that over the next 2 or 3 slides here. Before I really dive into it, I will let you know that I've been on the New York State of Health website. It's actually not too bad. It's fairly user-friendly. You can click through there. You can make comparisons. You can check out whether or not your doctors are in this plan or that plan. And you can compare what the coverage looks like and like I said, what the cost is compared to it. One thing to really point out, this New York State of Health plan is for those who are not yet Medicare eligible. So the pre-65 group, if you will. Another thing, one step further, who is eligible for the marketplace? In reality, just about everyone. You do have to be a resident of New York State. You have to be a U.S. citizen, and you cannot be currently incarcerated, which I'm assuming if you're logging in, the current audience today, I'm assuming is not behind bars. So probably doesn't affect too many people. In the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you're going to see the 1-800 number, as well as the website. That website, that link will be posted to the chat at some point here, and you're probably going to see it on the next few screens as well if you don't have a chance to jot it down now. So there it is. Okay. So yeah, there, like I said, there's their website. They also have a 1-800 number, like I had mentioned, it's on the bottom there. Just like any 800 number, you call in, you might get somebody who's very knowledgeable. And unfortunately, sometimes you might get somebody who might not be quite as helpful. But my experience has been pretty good. And they have been pretty good at explaining the different coverages and helping you navigate the website. So if this is where you end up having to look for coverage, I would encourage you to poke around first on your own, but then don't be afraid to call that 1-800 number if you get stuck with anything. When you log in, or when you start this process, a few things that are going to be handy is one, a list of your doctors. All right, because one of the things you're going to do is you're going to want to make sure, like I had mentioned before, that your doctors are going to accept whatever plan that you ultimately decide on. And then also a list of what drugs you are currently taking. By having those things, you should be able to get a pretty good idea as to what the cost will be, not only for the plan itself, but what your drugs on a monthly or annual basis will end up being. Okay. There is an open enrollment. Excuse me. It ends up running around November 16th for about 4 to 6 weeks. Just about everyone here is probably used to some sort of open enrollment through your employer. During that time period, it gives you an opportunity to look at your existing plan and compare it to other plans that are available. And during that, if you make any changes, whatever changes you make will go into effect come the first of the year. There typically are also special enrollment periods throughout the year that you can also change that coincide outside of that open enrollment period. Things for like marriage or divorce, if you lose coverage, or if you're, let's say you're on your spouse's plan and your spouse decides that they're going to retire in the middle of the year and you lose coverage through your spouse, that would be considered a special enrollment event where you then could look to the New York State Health for coverage at that point. Dental. So whether we're talking pre-65 or post-65, I will tell you that dental tends to be a challenge, okay? And you may be experiencing that now. Not all dentists take insurances. Not all procedures are completely covered. And so it can be frustrating sometimes. The coverage is a reimbursement program where you have to come out of pocket to pay for that procedure or that cleaning, and then you have to file some paperwork to have it reimbursed. But you can find those dental plans through the New York State Health. They also have benefits that you can find through AARP. But really, I will tell you that the health insurance end of it, you know, when you go see your doctors, when you have a procedure done that is not dental related, it is pretty robust. The dental end can sometimes be a challenge, though. If you end up moving out of state, I wouldn't blame you. We're just a few months away from winter. We all know what the winters bring in New York. A lot of times people will decide to move out of state. If you decide to do that, you're out of state for more than 6 months out of the year, you're going to want to reach out to the New York State of Health. Again, you could call the 1-800 number and let them know. They should be able to guide you to whatever programs are available in whatever state that you're moving to. And you'll probably be able to find a better suited plan than staying on the New York State Health plan. So that concludes the first part of the presentation, which again, it was the pre-65 portion. The next few minutes now, we'll talk about Medicare, or the post-65 portion. This is really where I'll be able to, in a little bit more depth, help everybody out or anybody out. We'll talk about original Medicare, which is Part A and Part B, and what that includes. We'll talk about supplements and Medicare Advantage plans. Again, we'll kind of keep that high level, but just give you an idea as to what that is. We'll also talk about enrollments, time periods, and how you can change your coverage, because that is a little bit different compared to what you're used to. And then there's also a change that I'm not sure if it's going to really affect anyone. Again, I don't know the demographics of who's on this call, but in January of this upcoming year, there's a major change to the drug portion of Medicare that I'll talk through. And at very least, it might, be helpful for anybody's parents that might be a little bit older and have more expensive drugs. But you may have heard of the donut hole, and that's what we're going to talk about and how that's changing. So first, let's talk about original Medicare. Like I had mentioned, is also referred to Part A and Part B, which is also known as original Medicare. Once you turn 65, you become eligible for this, okay? Part A, what is it? Part A covers your hospital insurance. There is no cost to Part A. My example for what Part A covers is this. If you were to get in some sort of an accident, you're rushed to a hospital, your bill for that would be billed under Part A. If all you had was Part A and you didn't have an Advantage or a supplement plan, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, what would happen is that you would be responsible for an annual deductible. That annual deductible is around $1,800 or $1,900. It changes every year. And that would cover you for your first 60 days that you're in the hospital. After 60 days, you would pay a per day copay. Again, no cost to it, and it covers hospital. Part B, on the other hand, Part B covers things like your doctor's visits, visits to a specialist, whether it's a cardiologist or pulmonologist, X-rays, MRIs, CAT scans, surgeries, inpatient and outpatient surgeries, just about everything else. The premium currently for Part B is around $175 a month. For 2025, it's going up to around $185 a month. And again, if you only had Part A and Part B, you would be responsible for an annual deductible of around $200. And then it becomes an 80-20 coinsurance. So the example that I use for Part B is, let's say you needed a knee surgery. Knee surgery, I don't know exactly what a knee surgery retail cost would be, but let's say it's $50,000. If you have Part B, you would be responsible for the first, call it $200 for the deductible, and then 20% of the rest. So a knee surgery could cost you, $8,000 to $10,000, depending on what it really is. So again, original Medicare consists of Part A and Part B. It's not terribly expensive if you think about it. You're not paying for A, you're paying for B at around $175. But it also, as you can see, is not very robust. All right, you're going to probably want something in addition to Part A and Part B, which is really where, if you're, first and foremost, if your employer through the school district offers either a supplement or a Medicare Advantage plan, you should look at that. They tend to be negotiated through your unions and can be pretty cost effective and maybe even better than what you can find if it's not available through your employer. But let's assume worst case scenario, your employer says that once you turn 65, you are on your own, you pick up original Medicare, and then you're going to want to look to either find a Medicare Advantage plan or a supplement plan. So Medicare Advantage plans. What I will say is that most people, when they turn 65, if they are relatively healthy, they don't have a lot of health elements, they're not going to the doctor all that often, about 95% of the time, in my opinion, a Medicare Advantage plan would be the most suitable, cost-effective way to get that ancillary coverage, if you will. The premiums on Medicare Advantage plans, depending on your area, can range from nothing, $0 a month, to maybe $30 or $40 a month. So again, relatively inexpensive. What they do is they offer a layer of coverage on top of original Medicare. So for my knee surgery example, if you didn't have a Medicare Advantage plan, again, you're going to pay $8,000, $10,000 perhaps. With a Medicare Advantage plan, you're going to pay a copay. Depending on your plan, it might be $300 or $400. So again, offers a pretty significant layer of coverage on top of what Part A and Part B does. The other nice thing about Medicare Advantage plans is it usually includes some dental coverage, some vision coverage. There's ancillary benefits for like hearing aids, vision, but most importantly, what Medicare Advantage plans include is drug coverage. Okay, that's important because once you turn 65, you are responsible to have Part D or drug coverage. If you don't, when you do eventually pick it up, you will likely end up paying a penalty. So the government wants you, once you turn 65, to have this coverage. And if you don't pick it up, you'll be penalized later on down the road. Like I said, the Medicare Advantage plans include that, which is nice. Sometimes though, people say, you know what? I got some serious health issues. I go to the doctor often, or I just had a a stroke and I go to the doctor, I got speech therapy and this therapy, a Medicare Advantage plan might not be a good fit in that case, which is when you would then look at a supplement. Supplements range from, $70 a month to a couple hundred to $300 a month, depending on what they are. They typically are a little bit more robust. So for example, if you're paying $300 a month, chances are you're not paying any copays. $300 a month, you go to the doctor every day, that's it. Again, depending on what plan you're on. The downside to a supplement, other than being a little bit more expensive, is that you do not have any dental, there's no vision, and most importantly, there is no drugs. So you would be responsible for picking up a standalone drug plan at that point as well. Okay. So again, I'm sure there's probably some questions. We'll save them at the end. But that is the difference between a Medicare Advantage and a supplement plan. Let's talk quickly about the donut hole, or that one topic that I was talking about that is changing come January 1st. So what this donut hole is really affects people who have more expensive drugs. Drugs like diabetes drugs or insulin, they tend to be expensive. Nasal sprays, lotions, and topical creams tend to be expensive. MS drugs, cancerous, all those specialty drugs can be very expensive. And what happens currently, before this change, what's currently happening is once the retail cost of your drugs hit a certain number, the cost to you as the recipient of Medicare goes up. So that, without getting into too much of the details, what happens is if you hit that mark, then you end up paying about 25% of the retail cost, which can be extremely expensive for people, okay? And it's very difficult. You have to come out of pocket, I think, somewhere around $8,000 a year currently before you exit that donut hole and your cost of drugs go back down to a reasonable level. On January 1st, that's all changing. They're getting rid of that donut hole, and basically what they're saying is that nobody will come out of pocket for more than $2,000 a year for their prescription drugs. Okay, so for those people who are on insulin and some other, what they refer to as tier 3 or 4 or 5 or specialty drugs, this is a godsend. This is great. This will save them a lot of money. Let me also go one step further. For those, I don't know, again, I don't know where the demographics of everybody is here. I don't want to scare everybody. There are many, many people that are on Medicare and they don't come anywhere close to that $2,000 mark. So, if you're on statins and blood pressure, like most of America after a certain age, most of those drugs are free. They are very, very inexpensive. So I don't mean to scare anybody if you're not that familiar with this donut hole, but this will be a big thing for our parents and our grandparents that, may have some more expensive drugs. If we could just talk a minute here about initial enrollment period. So I had mentioned earlier, everybody is eligible for Medicare once they turn 65. You're going to want to start that enrollment period. Either that you got to pick it up either the 3 months prior, the month of, or the 3 months after your 65th birthday. Okay. If you don't do that, there could be penalties. You probably have to wait a whole nother year for the next initial enrollment period. So you want to make sure that you are on top of that. I will tell you right now, if you are turning 65 and you are collecting Social Security, then you are already in their system and they will automatically enroll you in Part A. And more times than not, they will automatically enroll you in Part B unless you opt out of it. Okay. However, if you are one of those individuals who are not collecting Social Security at the age of 65 and you're waiting for later on down the road, you're going to need to be a little bit proactive to pick up Part A and Part B. You're going to have to go to the SSA.gov website and you can enroll in Medicare through that. So that's that for the initial enrollment period. Once you are on Medicare, there is an annual enrollment period. And that runs from approximately October 15th. It's actually coming up in the next week or so to about December 5th. And again, just like any open enrollment period, during that time period, you're given that time period to review, your existing plan and how it's changing for the upcoming year. You can switch during that time period to either a different Medicare Advantage plan or from a Medicare Advantage plan to a supplement plan or vice versa. And any of those changes that you make during that time period will go into effect come January 1st. There is also, and this is one thing to take away, Medicare is much more flexible than what you may be accustomed to pre-retirement. So there are many opportunities where you can actually switch your plan outside of that open enrollment period. So I oftentimes will tell people, when it's time to make a decision on what plan you should go on, look at your current situation. Yes, it may change, but just know more times than not, if you need to switch in the middle of the year, it can be done. Where typically, if you're through your employer, you got to really wait to the open enrollment period of the upcoming year. And that is pretty much it. I know I feel like I kind of ran through it. These presentations where I can't see anybody or you guys can't stop me in the middle and ask questions are a little difficult for me. I feel like I'm just talking to the abyss, but Shay, if you're around, or Allison, if you want to open it up to questions, I'd be more than happy to answer any of those questions and go into more detail if necessary.
Yes. It does look like we have some questions here. Are you able to see the questions, Mike?
I do. If you guide me as to where I would go, here is it in the chat or the Q&A?
Yes, it's in the chat.
All right, I see it here. Yes, I do see them. Let me see. All right, I'll just go down the list here.
Okay, awesome.
Do you apply for Medicare after you retire? So you're not going to be able to apply to Medicare unless you are turning 65. You have to be 65 to be eligible for Medicare. Okay. If you're retiring at 65, yeah, absolutely. If you're retiring at 55 or 57, again, you're going to want to look to your employer to see if they offer some sort of coverage between the ages of, say, 55 to 65, or your spouse, like I had mentioned, or the New York State marketplace. Okay. Am I required to apply for Medicare if I have not retired? That's a good question. So if you are not retired and you are 65, you do not have to pick up Medicare. What I usually advise people to do is to go ahead and pick up Part A. Again, there's no cost to it. Okay. More times than not, your employer does not require you to pick up Part B. Smaller companies sometimes do. That's a question really for the HR department at that point. But if you have what Medicare considers as qualifying coverage past the age of 65, then you can prolong picking up Part B without having a penalty. I get that often when people are in, say, the public sector and they retire at the age of 67. They say, hey, it makes sense for me to stay on based on a cost standpoint, it makes sense for me to stay on my employer's plan until I retire. When I pick up Medicare at 67, am I going to be penalized? And the answer is no. As long as it is qualifying coverage and you have a drug plan through that employer, there is no penalty. What you would need to do at that point is fill out the Part B application, as well as there typically is a form, it's called an employment verification form, I think is what it's referred to as, where your employer or your school district or whatever will sign off and show proof that you've had qualifying coverage from when you were Medicare eligible, 65 to, say, 67 in my example. Let's see. Next question. My husband turned 65 last December. he signed up for Medicare but stayed on my health insurance. I don't think he signed up for the Medicare drug coverage. What should we do at this point so he doesn't get a huge penalty? You know what? Can we get whoever that is? Can I get their contact information? Or I don't know how that would work, but I'd like to take that one kind of offline. That might be a little bit more in depth than would be appropriate, I think, for this setting right here. But I definitely want to answer that.
Yeah, so that was an anonymous question. So if whoever asked that could just email Mike using his email on the screen, that would be great.
Let me just read it one more time. Maybe I can give like just 1,000-foot overview. He signed up for Medicare, but stayed on my health insurance. I don't think he signed up for the drug coverage. Oh, okay. You know, to be honest with you, as long, again, every situation is a little bit different, but as long as your coverage includes drugs, you're probably fine. You're probably fine. Okay. Again, it has to be qualifying drug coverage, qualifying health insurance, where you can prolong picking up the Part B portion. Or I'm sorry, the drug portion as well. Where do you get a supplement plan if not via your employer? So that is kind of where I can come into play, right? I can help people identify whether a Medicare Advantage plan is the most suitable, or a supplement plan. Medicare Advantage plans are typically offered through insurance companies, so are supplement plans for the most part. And I can represent several insurance companies when it comes to that. So you're going to look to someone like myself for that type of guidance. Would you pick up Medicare under those circumstances at any time or during the special enrollment period? I'm not sure if I understand that question. Let me read it again. Would you pick up Medicare under those? I'm guessing, I'm not sure what those circumstances are. I'm sorry.
I think it might mean if you lose coverage through a divorce or through any other of those qualifying things that would otherwise allow you to sign up for Medicare.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, I mean, the answer is I would, that is considered a special enrollment period, or a reason why you can switch at that point. You would not have to wait to say, let's say, God forbid, you got divorced, right? And that happened in June, okay? And you might sit there and say, you know what? Oh my gosh, my open enrollment period doesn't start till October. That's okay. If you are, let's say, we're talking Medicare for a second. Let's say you're 66 years old when this happens, you can jump onto Medicare in June. You could pick up all that coverage at that point. And that's the case even if you're pre-65. I mean, that is considered at a loss for the technical term, but it's like a qualifying event as to why you could switch your plan outside of the open enrollment period. All right, I'm still working and I'm 66. I signed up for Medicare Part A when I turned 65. Okay. When I retire, I will be eligible by the employer to continue my health coverage. Will Medicare be my primary and my employer's coverage as secondary? Will I still need to sign up for Part B and or Part C? So when you turn 65 and your employer requires you to pick up Medicare, typically that's because, to my understanding, Medicare becomes primary and your employer coverage becomes secondary. And so when you're picking up Part A and Part B, well, let me see the second question. Will I still need to sign up for Part B and or C? So Part A and Part B is that original Medicare. What the employer is offering you is what is considered Part C. And if there's a drug plan, which it likely would include, that is the Part D of it. Okay, just for one little clarity, when I'm talking about Medicare Advantage plans and supplement plans, because, sorry, real quick, there's A, B, C, and D, and this is where things kind of get confusing, right? Those are the four major parts of Medicare: A, B, C, and D. Original Medicare is A and B. Medicare Advantage plan, which is that layer on top of original Medicare, is considered Part C. And if it has a drug plan, included in it, that's your Part D. If you don't go with a Medicare Advantage plan and you go with a supplement, the supplement is your Part C. And then you'd have to pick up a drug plan separately, which is your Part D. And one other thing is you cannot have a Medicare Advantage plan or a supplement plan, AKA Part C, Part D, unless you have Part A and Part B. So you have to have the original before you have the other components to it. I hope that didn't make everybody's head spin. I'm sorry. I often put this out there. You know, you got to remember, I kind of say this tongue in cheek. You got to remember what Medicare is. It is a government ran program. And just like most government ran programs, they are overly complicated, right? Unnecessarily complicated in some instances. But my goal with working with my clients is to try to help, really bring it to the ground level and give you the pieces of information that you need to help you make an educated decision. So that's all I see for questions.
Yes, I don't see any more questions either.
Okay.
Okay, so if there's no more questions, again, Mike's contact info is on this last slide, and it'll be posted to SAANYS YouTube channel and SAANYS website. So if you want to take a look into the recording, it'll be posted today. And if there's no more questions, thank you, Mike, for the presentations, and thank you also for the great questions, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. You guys all have
All
a
right.
good day. Nice Friday.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks,
Thanks, Mike.
Lachey. Have a great day.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.